In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the array function on the control panel of a Solo or a Skycut cutter in order to do multiple print and cuts. And by multiple print and cuts, I don't mean like putting two on here and then doing one and then resetting the blade up here to do the other. I'm talking about you set it one time. You set the blade tip right down here on this one first, and it will not only scan and cut out this one, but then it'll automatically move up to the next reg mark and then read all four reg marks and cut it. And same thing if you want to do basically 3 printouts at one time. It'll do the same thing. You would start down here in this corner, it'd do 1, number 2, number 3, all in one go, which can be really great when you're in a very, production-oriented mode where you're doing the same thing, doing multiples of the same thing. It can, save you time. I'm going to cover this situation first, where you have 2 printouts. Then I'm going to do a separate, or later I'm going to cover the situation where you have 3, because it's more than just turning your printout sideways. There's a lot of difference in this situation versus this one. So I recommend you start with this one first and even give it a try. Then we can move on, or you can move on and watch the second part, which covers, how this situation is different, all the different things you need to do to make this one work. Okay, so now then, when you're setting up your project for a 2-copy layout only, it's basically the same thing as what you're already using. You don't have to do anything special. The only thing, and you could go ahead and print off, you're going to be doing 2 at a time, but you could go ahead and print off 8 of them if you wanted to, right? And then you'd have 4 different runs, with 2 copies. So just go ahead and, make sure your reg marks fit within your print bounds, and your shapes, are going to, what's being printed fits within the page bounds, etc., or within the print bounds. So then, and then when you have the 2 of them printed, then when you put them onto the mat, let's switch back over here. Let me turn this off. So when you put them onto the mat, just, you put your first one down, kind of making sure it's nice and straight with the grid. And then for the second one, then when you put the second one on, let me zoom in here, the top one needs to be kind of lined up with the one right below it. And so that just makes it easier for the camera to find the next set of reg marks, because it's going to, finish doing all the cutting, and then it's going to move up here and it's going to be looking for this reg mark next. And the way it knows where exactly to find that next reg mark is going to be on the distance that is between these 2 printouts based on the reg mark. So you're going to take a metric ruler. You should have a metric ruler available. Most people do. And if you don't, you could do it in inches, but it's going to be a little trickier. So measure this distance from this corner down to this corner, okay, just this distance right here. And this is something that, based on if you're still using the same printer and the same, reg mark settings and all the rest of it, this should be consistent from one run to the next. So you only have to do this one time, okay, and then you're going to be entering that into the control panel. So because I had entered at 0.5 centimeters from the page bound, well, then I know this is going to be about 10 millimeters. So I can confirm it's about 10. But if it's 9 or it's 11, whatever, you can enter it. Even actually, if you just put in 10, it probably, the camera will still find the reg mark. So, don't obsess over that. Just, it is worth measuring it, especially because if you use based on print bounds, well, then printers like, I think it's Canon, has a larger required print margin at the bottom than, say, an Epson does, where an Epson has the same for top and bottom. So it's worth measuring it one time just to make sure you know what that distance is, and use that, on the control panel. So now then, let's move over to the control panel.
Okay, so the fastest way, the easiest way to access the array function is to press the USB option up here in this corner, even though you're not using the USB drive at all, because you'll be sending your file from Create directly. But that's fine. Again, this is just this. There's 2 different ways to access this window. This is the fastest. So then just press Array Set. And then up here, if this is turned off, go ahead and press it so that it's a green, so that means it's activated. And then there's 2 sets of X and Y's here. This top set is your array. It's however many that you're going to be, fitting onto the mat. And in this first test, I've got it set to 1. And then down here, Y, which is up and down, I set it to 2. Okay, then down here is the spacing between the reg marks that I showed you how to enter. And in this first example, that distance is going to be 10, because I basically have my reg marks setting set to 0.5 centimeters from from the outside edge of my page. So that's why this one now will be set to this Y. Now, not the X. The X's would be the spacing if they're going this direction. The Y is the spacing if you're going this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to 5 millimeters. Oops, I'm sorry, 10 millimeters. It's 5 for each one of them. So now it's 10 millimeters. And then if you're, for any reason, this says inches instead of millimeters, just cancel out here, go to Set, go to General Settings, click on Units, and then change from inches back to millimeters. Okay. All right, so then coming back down here, so to my array set, so I have this all set, and it will retain these values, so you won't have to reset them every time, let's say, you're going to use the recut button on the control panel, so you can just do one after another after another. You won't have to come in and, modify these numbers as long as you're always using, the same printout and, everything is, the reg mark settings haven't changed or anything like that.
So now I'm ready to send it to cut. So I click on the create button, or the cutter button if you're using your cuts a lot. And then in this window, of course, I have this enabled, so I make my settings and whatever. And then just like a normal cut, you just click on print and cut, and then you click on start scan. Now then, you won't hear anything happen because the cutter is waiting for you to come and confirm. It's going to go ahead and start sending data, but it's waiting for confirmation. So we'll go over and have a look at that now.
So as soon as you send the data and it starts being received by the Solo, this window down here, this part down here will pop up, and it's going to say array cut, cut once, or basically a return icon. So what it's waiting for is waiting for you to confirm whether you only want to cut one, which you have that option of just doing one at a time, or in this case, I'm going to go ahead and click on array cut because I wanted to do both of them at one time. So I press on array cut, and now then it's going to start reading the reg marks. Okay, so now it's going to cut it out, and I'm going to speed forward for the second part. And now it comes over and it starts reading the next 4 registration marks. And then proceeds to cut out the second part. So here we have our 2 cuts, and I'll just lift this off. This is copy paper, so very easy to cut, very easy to weed. So 2 cuts done at once. Yay.
So with the 2 sheet layout, the 2 copies, you had plenty of room to place them on a 24-inch mat. There was no, restrictions there. However, if you're going to try to fit 3 of them, it becomes much more complicated because of just the width of, a letter size sheet and the length of most 24-inch mats. Now notice the silhouette ones are too short. You're not going to be able to fit those on there. You can, the model I did here, the simulation I did here is all done to scale, and this one is based on the Caesar mat, which is 24 inches, and it's actually 26 and an 1/8 inch long. So you've got the room to put these 3 8.5 wide sheets, which add up to like 25 and a half. Now, one thing to remember, you have to leave some room for the pinch wheels, because the pinch wheels are up here at the very top, on both sides. And if you move the mat moves forward enough so that the camera can read these marks up here, there's a chance that mat's going to slip out from under the pinch wheels, which is a disaster. So the way I do it on mine is that I have these 3, sheets here, but I align the bottom one way down here, at the edge of the mat, or maybe a tad further down, so that I have at least, I believe it's 5/8 of an inch room up here at the top for the pinch wheel, so that when the camera comes all the way up here, it doesn't shoot the mat out. Now, the other thing is that I had to change my reg mark settings. Instead of using 5 millimeters from the page bounds, I had to use 10 millimeters just to give that extra room. And of course, when you do that, you also can't have any cut lines that are going to extend beyond that. They can still extend beyond, this side, right? And, of course, pay attention to, how you're putting on the mat, but they can't extend beyond this upper border right here, or, you could run into problems. And of course, all of these warnings tell you one thing: please do test cuts, right? Try out 3 sheets of copy paper, okay? You don't want to waste anything, just use copy paper, and test out your project to make sure it's going to work. One other possible option you have, and this only works if you're not cutting all the way through the sheet, okay? I'm going to emphasize that again. It's not for those where you do a kiss cut and then a full cut around it. But if you're only doing kiss cuts, then the other option, and I've not personally tried this myself, but I see people in other countries with the Skycut cutters, some of them do this. And what they do is they tape together their sheets. okay, with, tape. And of course, I've got the tape here on top. You'd probably want to have it behind it so it doesn't interfere with the reg marks. But if you do that and you're very careful and get everything all lined up nicely, and you know how to load a long sheet into your cutter so that it will move straight through the cutter, then this is another option that you could use. And you could do, maybe up to 6 sheets. I wouldn't do too many, because if it gets too long, then you start running into, it could, veer off course. And it's not because the pinch wheels aren't nice and tight, because as you know they are. It has to do with the fact that when you load the sheet initially, if you're askew, just like, like a degree, and you don't even see it, well, then the longer it feeds that material, the more askew that angle is going to get. That's just mathematics. You can't fight that. So that would be something you could load it, and then you can move it all the way forward and all the way back, most of the way, to make sure that you don't have to worry about the pinch wheel coming off the side, or paper ending up scrunched up against the end cap. There are ways around that. So then the next consideration is that you can't just take your printout and rotate it sideways onto the mat, and then, let's say, I'll just come over here to the document panel and change that to landscape, and then it will work. That's not the way it works at all. Because, in fact, let me come over here now to my other example, which is here. Because what happens is when you move something landscape, in fact, let me go ahead and select this, and then I'll rotate it. Rotate it this direction. Oops. Did not rotate all my pieces here, so I need to make sure I do a Control A, and then let's make sure I've got everything. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to rotate it. Okay, so now then, if I change this to landscape up here, now notice, remember this little triangle up here at the top? Let me move up so you can see it. That little triangle indicates the direction that the printout is moving into the cutter, okay? If I just change this to landscape, okay, and I'm going to say no because I've already rotated everything, you'll notice it's over here. So when I put my shapes on here in landscape, orientation, I'm still going to have to put it on portrait-wise on the mat. That's just the way it works in the software. So instead, what you need to do is you need to make yourself a cutting mat where the triangle is up here at the top, but it looks landscape like this. And that's how you do landscape printing within Create software or within your cuts a lot. So over here on the document panel, I'm going to come down to custom size, all right, and then here you'll change this. You're going to change this to 11 and 8.5, okay, and then I'm going to click on OK. And of course, you probably want to name that if you're doing it all the time, but now then you're going to do portrait, okay, and no. So now then, see that you've got your wide mat, but the triangle's up here at the top showing the direction you're going to be feeding this printout in. So that's how you do that. And then I didn't name it because I've already have one name, but I have one that I had already, in that custom size window, after you enter it, you can click Save Preset and give it a name. And so I've already done that. So mine is called, what I call it? I call it Letter Rotated. Okay, so now here's the next thing you need to think about. When you turn on show print margins and show reg marks, your reg marks look fine. And by the way, this is something also, this is one of these, there's no negotiation. You got to do this, okay? You need to, in your settings window for your reg marks, you must use page bounds. If you try to use print bounds, trust me, it's going to mess up. There's something about when it's trying to communicate to the printer, and the printer, the way it wants to read the print bounds, it's just, it can be a disaster because it can flip-flop on you. So if you change it to page bounds, you won't have that problem. So again, as I said, I made it 1 centimeter so that you can have 3 sheets and the camera's going to be able to reach that upper set of reg marks to scan them. Then this will work here, okay? So I've got that set, and let's cancel here. But now then, notice my print margins are off. Let me unselect so nothing's selected. See the print margins? They're still set to letters. So you'll have to go to File, Print Setup, and then just change this to Landscape, okay? And then after you change it to Landscape, now everything looks correct, and you're ready to print your project, and you can print 3 of them. One more thing. Didn't want to forget this again. Grab your shapes, and remember, you don't want any cut lines going above these reg marks. So you may have to move your project down, okay, so that, and it's okay if they come below here. It's okay if they go out the sides, just not at this top border here. No cut lines beyond the boundaries of the reg marks. So next I put the three printouts onto the mat, and of course at the bottom of the mat I make sure the first one is aligned right with the very, very bottom, so that gives me plenty of room at the top for those pinch wheels. And then up at the top, I confirm that yes, I have plenty of room up there. That looks like, I think it's around 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. I don't know. Again, that's something you need to experiment with yourself to make sure that it's going to work with copy paper for you, and then it should work for your printouts. Then finally, I measure the distance between the reg marks. And so I take my metric ruler and put it up between, two of the reg marks, one on one sheet, one on the next, and it turns out to be as 21 millimeters based on how my printer printed the reg marks. So that's what I'm going to put into the software.
Okay, so again, to set up the array, I'm going to click on or press the USB button, click on Array Set, turn it on, and then this time I'm going to have 3 of them. So I put in the number 3, and then down here my spacing ended up to be 21 when I measured it. So I'm going to set that to 21. So now then I'm ready to go ahead and send my project.
So I click on the Create button, or if I was in Cuts a lot, it'd be the Cutter button over here. So I click on it and then verify, yes, I see my shapes, and then whatever else you need to do in terms of your settings, and then click on Print+Cut, click on Start Scan, and again, there's going to be a pause. It's going to go ahead and start sending data, but you'll need to go turn it on, or you'll press the button on the cutter itself.
Okay, so I press Array Cut, and it starts reading the first reg mark. Okay, so I'm showing it doing the last one for the first sheet. And then it moves right up and starts scanning the next set of 4. Isn't that cool? Okay, and now it's doing the last shape on the second sheet. And it goes up to the last set of marks. And this is where it's kind of scary, because this is the furthest, at the top that is going to go. And it did it just fine. It was able to read all 4 marks. Okay, so now then I pull the mat out, and we'll see how nicely it cut out these stickers. And I had forgotten to to actually turn off so that the red outline did not print. I left it set on cut, but this is kind of good because you can see that the accuracy, you can just barely see the red line on all of the stickers, just showing you how accurately it was able to cut out all 3 sheets at one time on the Solo. Very cool.
Finally, since there are a number of things that you need to remember before you set up a 2-cut, and especially if you're going to set up a 3-cut, I've put a link to a checklist in the description. So that way you can pull up that checklist, print it out, keep it handy, and then that way, you can make sure before you start that you haven't forgotten to do anything. So thanks very much for watching the video, and if you have any questions, let me know.